Why does one conversation from months ago still play on a loop while 100 others vanished by morning? In 1927, a psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnic found the pattern in something as ordinary as restaurant orders. Waiters remembered every unpaid table in exact detail. Once the check was settled, the memory dissolved almost instantly. The brain wasn't tracking meaning. It was tracking whether something was still open. But for most of human history, there was no such thing as an unfinished conversation. No delay button, no read receipt, no message left unread. If something needed saying, you set it to a face 3 feet away under firelight. There was only said or unsaid, nothing in between. So why does your brain still treat an old text thread like an unpaid bill? Here's what we're getting into. Why the mind clings to loose ends. Why unfinished outweighs finished by a wide margin. And why the one exchange you can't stop replaying might be running on your oldest software. Berlin, the 1920s. A city obsessed with the new science of the mind. At the University of Berlin, a group of researchers met in a small cafe after long days in the lab. They studied under Kurt Lewin, a man fascinated by unfinished business. One evening, Lewin noticed something. The waiter at their table could recite every unpaid order without writing a word down. 10 tables, dozens of dishes, exact, unprompted. Minutes after the bill was paid, the same waiter couldn't recall a single item. It was gone, completely erased. Lewin handed the puzzle to one of his students, a young researcher named Bluma Zeigarnic. Test it, he said, not in a restaurant, in a lab. Zeigarnic brought in over 100 people and gave each of them a set of small tasks: stringing beads, simple arithmetic, shaping figures out of clay. About 20 tasks each. Roughly half she let finish. The other half she interrupted mid-task. No warning, no explanation. Just stop. Later, with no notice, she asked everyone to recall the tasks from memory.
The results weren't subtle. People remembered the interrupted tasks at nearly double the rate of the ones they'd finished. Some described the unfinished ones in strange detail. The texture of the clay, the exact number left in a row. The completed tasks barely registered. Zeigarnic published the findings in 1927. Levin named the mechanism a quasi-need, a small tension created the moment a goal begins, released only when the goal ends. Until then, the tension holds, like a held breath, like a circuit that never closed. The mind, it turns out, doesn't file memories by how important they are. It files them by whether they're finished. An unfinished grocery list can outrank a wedding if the wedding is over and the list isn't. This became known as the Zeigarnic Effect. For almost a century, it's shown up in classrooms, in call centers, in kitchens, anywhere a task gets cut short. The waiters were never really about waiters. They were a glimpse into an older filing system, one that doesn't care what the task is. To be fair, not every later study reproduced the effect as cleanly as Zeigarnic did. Some replications found it weaker, or dependent on the task, dependent on how invested someone was in the outcome. So treat it not as an iron law, but as a well-documented tendency, one that shows up often enough to matter. And it matters most in the situations that were never designed to be tasks at all. So does this only apply to waiters and to-do lists? In 2011, 2 researchers, E.J. Masacampo and Roy Baumeister, wanted to know if the Zeigarnic effect could be switched off. They gave participants an unfinished task and split them into 2 groups. One group just sat with it, unfinished. The other group was told to write down a specific plan for how they'd finish it later. Not finish the task, just plan it, on paper. Afterward, both groups did an unrelated reading task while researchers tracked how often their minds wandered back to the unfinished thing. The group that only sat with it kept intruding on themselves.
Unfinished thoughts, surfacing again and again. But the group that wrote the plan
barely thought about it at all. The task was still unfinished. Nothing had actually closed, but the brain couldn't tell the difference between a plan and completion. It just needed the sense of an ending. The study became known as the "Consider It Done" effect, and it revealed something the waiters never could. The mind isn't chasing resolution itself, it's chasing the feeling of resolution. Any signal that a loop has closed, real or symbolic, is enough to quiet it. Which raises an uncomfortable question. What happens when the open loop isn't a task at all? What happens when it's a person? A sentence someone left hanging? A conversation that ended without ending? You can't write a plan for the last thing someone said to you. You can't schedule a future version of closure with someone who's already gone. There's no follow-up meeting for an unanswered message. So the brain does the only thing it knows. It keeps the file open, keeps checking it the way you check an unpaid bill sitting on the counter. It isn't sentimental about it. It's procedural. An unfinished exchange gets flagged the same way an unfinished puzzle does. Not because the person mattered more, because the ending never arrived. And a mind built on completion does not know how to stop looking for one. 100 conversations can end cleanly. Goodbye, see you later. The loop closes. The memory fades the same way the paid bill fades from the waiter's mind. One conversation ends mid-sentence. A call that dropped. A message left unanswered. A goodbye that wasn't a goodbye. And it never gets filed away. It just sits there, tagged, unresolved, replaying. Not because you're weak, not because you're obsessive, but because somewhere a very old mechanism is still waiting for the check to be paid. So what actually causes the replaying itself? What's the mechanism behind the 1 a.m. loop? The word we use for the thing we're after is closure. It comes from the Latin claudere, to shut, to close. A door swinging shut, a lock clicking into place. English borrowed the word to describe emotional endings because the metaphor was already built into the brain.
An open door, an open case, an open wound. The language knew before the science did.
In 2010, the anthropologist Helen Fisher scanned the brains of people who had just been rejected romantically. She showed them photos of their ex while they lay inside an fMRI machine. The region that lit up wasn't the region for sadness. It was the ventral tegmental area, the same reward circuit activated by cocaine, by gambling, by craving. Being rejected didn't calm the craving. It intensified it. The brain treated an unresolved relationship like a slot machine that hadn't paid out yet, not a door that had already closed. Fisher called it the neurochemistry of frustration attraction. The less finished something feels, the harder the brain fights to finish it. Which means the messiest breakups, the ones with no real conversation, no clean goodbye, no answer, are the ones the brain refuses to file away. Not because they were the deepest love, but because they were the least resolved. Every mechanism we've named so far, the quasi-need, the intrusive thought, the reward circuit lighting up, is really one system wearing different clothes. A system built for a world where every unresolved thing was a physical task, a hunt half finished, a shelter half built, a threat half assessed. That world rewarded a brain that couldn't let go of anything incomplete. A hunter who forgot the wounded animal didn't eat. A group that forgot an unresolved conflict didn't survive it twice. So the trait got kept, generation after generation. Not because it feels good, it rarely does, but because forgetting what was unfinished used to be dangerous. Now, the danger is gone. The mechanism isn't. It just got handed a new kind of unfinished task. A conversation instead of a carcass. A text left unread instead of a threat in the dark. Same circuit, different century. What if it's not a flaw at all?
What if the 1 a.m. replay isn't your mind punishing you? What if it's your mind doing exactly what it was built to do? Running the oldest audit system it owns. Checking, one more time, whether the account is settled. It doesn't know the difference between a person and an unpaid bill. It was never given that distinction.
It only knows open or closed. So when a conversation ends mid-sentence, when someone disappears without an answer, when a goodbye never quite arrives, your brain doesn't do anything strange. It does the same thing a waiter's brain does with an unpaid table. It holds the details. It replays the order. It keeps the tab open. Not out of weakness, out of design. The exhaustion you feel at 2 a.m. running the same 5 minutes of a conversation that ended a year ago isn't proof that something is wrong with you. It's proof the system is working exactly the way 100,000 years built it to work. The tragedy isn't that you remember. The tragedy is the world you live in now rarely offers the thing that old system was built to receive: an ending, a clean one, a said thing instead of an unsaid one. Modern life is full of relationships that don't close, they just go quiet. No funeral for a friendship, no ceremony for a situationship that faded out, no answer for the message that never got a reply. Every one of those is a table no one ever paid. Sitting in your memory, lit up, waiting. You woke up this morning and probably remembered something small and unfinished before you remembered something big and done. That's not a malfunction. That's a waiter's brain doing the only job it was ever given. In 1927, Bluma Zeigarnic watched a man forget an entire evening the moment the bill was paid. Somewhere, right now, your mind is still holding a table open, waiting for a check.